Have you ever found yourself in a situation that felt hopeless? When you looked at it and you heard the news, when you found yourself in this place, it felt like there was no hope. Maybe you were lost, maybe you were in a situation. I know I felt this way. And today I'm really excited, week one, talking about in this series of being never alone, that God is near. And it brings me to when I was 4 years old. Yes, I was 4. I remember this so vividly. I was living in Zambia. My family's Zambian, and my brothers were crazy. There was one day we were out in the yard, and my brothers had the keys to my dad's car, and they thought it would be funny to throw me in the trunk. Throw me in the trunk and see if I could find my way out. You get in the trunk, you better believe that African sun was hot. It was hot in that trunk, and so I'm screaming my head off, cannot believe that I found myself stuck in the trunk of a Toyota Corolla. After screaming, they finally let me out, and I thought I was free, and then they threw me back in there and had me stuck again. After screaming, I saw this little light, and this little light was a lever that was an emergency exit. I pulled the lever, and I got out of there, and even though I felt hopeless, I found my way out. Sometimes for us, it might not be as simple as finding a lever to find our way out of hard situations. It might not be as easy to just tell the doctor who tells your parents or your mom or your brother who got cancer that we're gonna pull this lever and the cancer is gonna go away. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where it's not easy to get out. 3 guys in the Bible experienced this in the book of Daniel, Daniel 3, Shaddye, Meshach, and Abednego. They were in the king's court. They were Israelites. They were Jews. They didn't worship the gods that the king worshiped. And there was one day the king had this statue, and it was a statue of himself. And he wanted all the people in the land to bow down and worship his statue. When Shaddye, Meshach, and Abednego said no, the king couldn't believe it and ordered them to be put in the fiery furnace. You've probably heard this story where the king puts them in the furnace. And when he puts them in the furnace, the king orders that the fire be turned up 7 times. And guys actually end up dying because the fire was brooming outside of the furnace. And when the king looks inside in Daniel 3 of the furnace, he notices that there was 4 people in the fire when he originally only put in 3. And what was crazy about these people that were in the fire was they weren't burning, they weren't dying, even though the Bible explains that they were fully clothed. In other words, it explains that because that would have helped them begin to burn quicker. They were fully clothed, but even though they had their clothes on, they were able to walk around freely in the fire. Another thing that's crazy about them walking around freely was that they were bound. They actually went into the fire bound. And so not only are they walking around, somehow, something or someone loosed the chains that were on them. And that 4th person, we believe, was a person of Jesus who came to be with Shaddye, Meshach, and Abednego in the midst of the fire. Now I want to read this in Daniel 3, why it's so crazy. And I want to take 2 things away from Shaddye, Meshach, and Abednego who found themselves in this hopeless situation. And the first thing that Shaddye, Meshach, and Abednego did when they found themselves in a hopeless situation was they weren't afraid. Verse 16 in Daniel 3 says, Shaddye, Meshach, and Abednego answered King Nebuchadnezzar, "Your threat means nothing to us. If you throw us in the fire, the God we serve can rescue us from your roaring furnace and anything else you might cook up." Do you know why they weren't afraid? They weren't afraid because Shaddye, Meshach, and Abednego had their trust in God. Even though we might go through situations that feel hopeless, that are hopeless, we don't have to be afraid. And can I tell you why we don't have to be afraid? We don't have to be afraid. It's not because we have our trust in ourselves. It's not because we believe so much in ourselves and we believe that we can make it through. We believe that we're strong enough to make it to the other side. We believe that we have what it takes to make it through the situation. No. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego showed that their trust was not in themselves. Their trust was in God. And what happens when your trust is in God? When your trust is in God, you no longer have to be afraid. I love how Proverbs 3 says in verse 5 and 6, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him and he will make your paths straight. Do you know how your path can be made straight? Do you know how you can find a way out of the hopeless situations, even though it might not look the way you expect it to? You can put your trust in God and he will make a way for you where there seems to be no way. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego tell us today, and they show us today, that in any circumstance, in anything that we might face that feels hopeless or we feel like there's no way out, we can put our trust in God. And in our trust being in God, we don't have to be afraid of what it is that we're facing. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Peace.